Shalom, family. It's that time again. This is Yisrael Ben Yahuda, your host, and this is our Biblical Heritage. Last week, or really it was over a week ago, a couple of weeks back, I made the first video, the first part of the series that involves, of course, an introduction to the book and just taking you through the contents of the book. And so, again, without further ado, we're going to pick up where we left off. We was in Revelations, the 13th chapter, if you need a second to grab your scriptures and you want to follow along. We ended at the 11th verse. At the 10th verse. We're going to pick up at the 11th verse at Revelations, the 13th chapter. And just before the 11th verse, we have an introduction, and I'm going to stop right there. The second beast, the United States, a nuclear power, and built on the wealth of slavery. And I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and it had two horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. No, why the earth? Because the earth represents a land not yet developed into a nation state, an attribute that points to it being raw, as in raw material, whereas Rome expanded on the ancient people of Japheth, and like to say the Celts, etc., they, have their own way of defining things, but when you get to the Celts, you're dealing really with the Hunnitic of early invasions. There were waves of invasions of the Hunnitic stock, so we have to go before Celts. But basically, when the seed of Adam, Japheth, was in the land, then Rome expanded west into what we know as Britain and many other places west that are common to us, France and so forth, was the expansion of the Roman Empire. This actually happened early on in the first century, not long after the Messiah. In any case, continuing on with the point, and so it speaks at this point of this beast that comes up with this like a lamb, but it spoke as a devil. It says it speaks that it came up out of the earth, and we talked about that because it's, even though, let me say this, Native Americans had their own civilization. What happened even very early on in the old world, our old world, was that we were already developed. We had trade, we had commerce, we had schools, we had organized, structurized governments and things that were really the foundation in which even the present society have borrowed or stole from us and built upon. So even Rome, Greece built upon what was done of our ancestors' old world. They established what we could call civilization, but it was civilization actually from the very conception of our first father Adam. Civilization existed and was established also within him. It wasn't like he was swinging from trees or so forth. Neither. We get these here these pictures that are given to us. What we don't understand is that Africa at large was brought into a primitive state, and that happened by invasion, migration, being unsettled, always moving, trying to avoid the enemy, things of this nature. And so that's very important to understand. I don't mean to get off the subject because all of that isn't in the book, but I want to bring that clarity out. So when we look at what happened in what we call Western Europe today, in the same fashion, there was the migration, there was also the genocide of the ancient Adamic people, because it was Adam's seed that first inhabited that land, and that's the point that I'm making and want to be clear about. All right, so continuing on, it says, and the appearance was as a lamb, and that was just an appearance. It appeared in its proclamations of the America of this lamb-like beast was freedom, a better life, the pursuit of happiness, personal sovereignty. This is what gave the appearance of a savior nation, a nation that would honor the rights of humanity. From the abundance of that heart, though, of the wicked heart, the mouth speaks. But as it grew more influential and powerful, those proclamations died. It became a distant memory, an illusion. only fulfilled for some. By today's statistics, that would be 1%. And that's a fact. They say 3% this, 3%, but we're talking about actual sovereignty, actual able to self-rule, or rule, in our case, under the Ruach, under the Most High. They rule under their particular gods and deities, and whatever it is that powers them. But we're speaking in essence of what freedom is really defined to really be. There's not a large percentage of people on the earth that truly have that sovereignty to be free. Back to the point again. So back to the text, we pick up at Revelations verse 12, and it says, "And he exercised all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he caused those who dwelled on the earth to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed." No. So how does America exercise the authority of the first beast? Well, by taking away your freedoms under the guise of war on terror. This they learned from their mother Britain. Britain is the master of divide and conquer, exploiting tribal rivalries, creating new ones, false flags, and terrorism. This is just to name a small portion of Britain's resume. Well, the United States is actually an extension of Britain. Even when we talk about, as they label Islam and terrorism and things of this nature. Well, in its root, it comes from a more agent, and it was called Wahhabism. And I don't mean an agent, I'm just saying in early times, maybe just before the 20th century, actually. And Britain, and you may have heard, may not have seen, but at least heard of the movie Lawrence of Arabia. And so Britain had this whole thing set up. They wanted to take over North Africa. They did just exactly what I just said to you. They divided, they exploited tribal rivalries. There was some genocide going on. They turned factions against each other. Of course, the promise of money, wealth, this, that, and they delivered. Don't get me wrong. They gave, their puppets money and means. They gave them Syria. They gave them Jordan. They, eventually, Israel they took for themselves. And the Esau or Edom, he ends up with Saudi Arabia and Jordan, and that's the contention, because as the Ottoman Empire, the Greeks, and this thing went down, that Syria became more of a basic heathen nation. And so when you see the makeup of Syria today, you have a combination of Arab, and you have Muslims who are Greek or Turkish, which would be of the Hannetic, and they now have a claim, and they still have the other Arabs, and of course some of the more indigenous mixed in amongst them. But this is a new thing. This isn't the old world when you look at North Africa, or what they call the Near East, Middle East today. No, this is new. This is recent. This is not even that old. They give you the perception that it's been that way for a very long time. But if you ever took the time and really go look at some vintage pictures of when, even the early days of America, when they were first able to take photographs, and even in their paintings, you will see a whole nother demographic in Egypt and Israel and Arabia and in all these places. And it was actually after many wars, and it was left in desolation, most of it, so it was a whole, and then they decided to come up with this plan, and they waves of invasions, and we end up with this mess. But anyway, let me stay on track here. But I want to point these things out as the book is bringing this out. I'm just adding a little bit extra to it today, just to bring more clarity. So, and along with Britain and this divide and conquer infiltration, America is known for its corruption, its fallen standards. It's well documented in the modern era, for instance, by miscarriage of justice, justice for sale. We just, in the news recently, it was talking about, the price of higher education, or, the wealthy paying their children's way. into the institutions of higher education where we can't even afford or have that advantage whatsoever. But they took everything, they gave it to us for a short time in the 60s, some civil rights, some access, where we were able to get into some doors, and then they quickly turned it away. Then they flipped the script and they said, hey, use black institutions, y'all need to integrate, you gotta let other people in, really. So where does the time come for us to repair, for us to heal, for us to recover? Because every time that we are, or we even start on that path, here they come, and we have our own sold out or fearful leadership who then compromise, and we end up back in the same position again. But again, I'm regressing, I'm going off a little bit. But this is the tendencies of what we're dealing with, and it's all defined really in these few verses, because when it's talking in prophetic language, we are talking about attributes, we're talking about tendencies, we're talking about looking at the first empire and its tendency. See, because like it or not, there's some realities even involving our very slavery in America. Our slavery didn't start out with the United States of America, it ended with the United States of America. Our slavery started out with Britain, with France, with Spain, with Portugal, bringing slaves to the New World and establishing colonies. It didn't stop in Germany, don't let me leave nobody out, but I'm just speaking of the bigger traders, which were all, how would I put it, empowered, financed, organized, and controlled by the Zionists. So, we can use a lot of names, Spain, Portugal, or whatever, France, so forth. But we, it's like the master of disguise, who's behind the scene. We always talk about this hidden hand, the Illuminati, they say the shadow government. They got all these terms, but what all these terms really point you to is they point you to Zionists. That's just the truth. That's, me being raw. Okay, here we go. In the note, we continue on the deadly wound. During World War II, Britain was bombed repeatedly by Hitler, to the point Britain was destroyed and basically put to death. It was the United States and the Marshall Plan, and you'll see those pictures, that rebuilt Britain and portions of Western Europe. This was the healing of the deadly wound of World War II. In verse 13, it goes on to say, and he does great signs, even to make fire come down from heaven to the earth before men. To this very day, the end of 2018 into 2019 of the Roman year, only the United States has the distinction to cause fire to come down from heaven. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, the atomic bomb, and the rise of the superpower. The miracle was the splitting of the atom. Robert J. Oppenheimer. Operation Paperclip was where they not only at the end of the war recruited many of the German scientists and governmental figures into the United States. The Bushes had a lot to do with this, by the way. But they also had defectors that came and left Germany that they, where they infiltrated and, persuaded and brought to the United States. And, because Germany was actually the most advanced society, despite Hitler or anything about Hitler, just talking about what they were working on. They had subs going on when nobody really, had the submarine fleet they had. They were working on all kinds of aeronautic things and rocket propulsion and jet engines and, missiles and bombs and, these kinds of things. Not only those technologies that we would say as far as war, but of course from war come out other technologies. So it was a very advanced and very prosperous society that the Zionists were going to take down. And they did. So in any case, the former German Nazi party were given political asylum in the United States in exchange for their services. This is where we get Oppenheimer, the inventor of the first atomic bomb, Revelations 13:14. And he leads those astray dwelling on earth because of the signs which he was given to do. Now he was given to do before the beast, saying to those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast, who's wounded by war. When it says sword, sword is an instrument of war. by war, yet lived. That's Western Europe at large, but of course Great Britain in particular, okay, as the head of the empire. A likeness of the first empire, who was a composite of the ancient fallen empires of the past. The United States of America, like no other, fashions this new world empire on the model. DC is a mixture of ancient Egypt, Babylon, Persia, Rome, Greece, with the Persian Mithras stationed on the top of the dome of the capital. The Egyptian obelisk is, of course, the Washington Monument. The design of its Abbey Road blocks the Pentagon just southeast of D.C. across from the Potomac. Revelations 13:15. And there was given to him a spirit to be a spirit. He was given to him to give a spirit to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause to be killed as many as would not serve, worship the image of the beast. So we have here, and what does this mean? See, when you're looking at all these wars, and the United States has been in war since its conception, but all these wars, their goal is just this, what you're reading, to cause all the world to serve the empire, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, and given a mark upon their right hand or their forehead, that no one should be able to buy or sell except he that has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. See, it's not singular. Okay, now I've heard everything. I've heard the microchips and implants and the social security number and the birth certificate. I've heard every version of what the mark is supposed to be. Yet, let's be practical. It says buy or sell unless you have the mark, name, or number. That's money. That's the economy. That's what we like to call capitalism. We call it free trade. There ain't no such thing. And so many others. You got the World Bank, you got the reserve system, you got the United States as the main currency in the earth. Not really as much as it was, but basically this is all being laid out for you here in code. Because unless you are, they allow you to, they put sanctions on you, you can't buy or sell. Look at Haiti. Look at Cuba forever. And we can go on with this. Look how they got Africa. Poor, slave, free. You see what I'm saying? And then Africa got a mixture of all that. So this is what they're laying out to you. This is the economic system that the Popol Vuh talked about. This is the economic system that Edom helped these Romans, these heathens create. Your twin brother, yes, he helped do this. This is his madness. This is, you want to know why Edom's the end of the world. It's not what these nuts tell you, but the real reason. I'm sorry, I know I'm going to step on some toes, but I'm going to tell you like it is. Continuing on. Well, this was done by first creating the modern education system, then making English a worldwide required language. The newest of all languages now dominates the world on every continent and in every mind or in your forehead, programming generations to be prepared to make a living, money, aka the dollar bill. Now, on the surface, this seems innocent enough. But the US dollar took on the role as the world reserve currency. Sanctions became the tool to starve whole nations into compliance of the will of the empire. Those who did not comply were sanctioned, cut off from the world economy, dominated by the global system founded in America. See, no nation until recently was able to endure or survive any complicit in any competent way or have any strength to survive against sanctions and threats of war and, aircraft carriers showing up at your shores, Sanctions were imposed, but with the falling of the empire today, the fading of the power of America and the influence of America and trust in America, those sanctions are having less and less effect on the nations of the world. Verse 18. And here's the wisdom. He who has understanding, let him calculate the number of the beast. For it is a number of a being or a people. Not a single man. It's a people. and his number is 666. Footnote, it says in some ancient manuscripts it says 616. But I'm going to tell you what this really points you to. This points you to something that's so very simple. It points you to those people who are ruling the world, the Zionists, who have taken on the status as Yah's or God's favorite people, and this status above all the rest, have manipulated the world into our current circumstance. You know, they got puppets everywhere. You got Macron's a puppet. You got Theresa May's a puppet. You got Trump's a puppet. You got a world full of puppets, and they're converting more puppets. Look what's going on in Venezuela. You know, there used to be a time when we may not have been sophisticated enough to look at a situation and really evaluate it and see it for what it is. But those days are long gone, man. I mean, you should be able to see plainly what's really going on in a circumstance like Venezuela, for instance. Now, we could talk about Africa all day long, but we done analyzed, we done broke Africa down to death. But this is something that's, you know, current, not far from us. And you should be able to see that. You should be able to know the footprint, the blueprint of what they do. Continuing on. From Genesis to the book of Revelations, the word of the Most High is clear. That this earth, the present world system, will end. The problem, we as citizens of this planet are misinformed. The only way to prepare is with proper knowledge of what we're facing. And according to the scriptures, the whole world lies and deception. So if the whole earth is rotating on the axis of a lie, Ben-Ami, this is quote. Then how do we know truth? It says, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels, there were angels, there was legions of them, by the way. That means tens of thousands were cast out with him. So if the whole world is deceived, the question then is, what is deception and what is true or truth? The first official use of the term Middle East by the United States government was in 1957. It was the Eisenhower Doctrine, which pertained to the Suez Canal. The Secretary of the State, John Foster Dulles, that's where we get Dulles Airport from, defined the Middle East as the area lying between, including Libya on the west and Pakistan on the east, Syria and Iraq on the north, and Arabia Peninsula to the south, plus the Sudan and Ethiopia. In 1957, the State Department explained that the term Near East and Middle East were interchangeable and defined the region as only including Egypt, Syria, Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar. The term Middle East has been criticized as simplistically Eurocentric in contemporary English language, academic, and media venues. The term is used both in European and non-European description. The Middle East has also led to some confusion over changing definitions. Before the First World War, Near East was used in the English to refer to the Balkans, the Ottoman Empire. The Middle East referred to Iran, the Caucasus, Afghanistan, Central Asia, Turkestan. Wow, really? No, I'm just saying, you know, that's stretching it out a bit, wouldn't you say? And then it goes on to say that the Far East referred to East Asia, like China, Japan, Formosa, Korea, Hong Kong. With the disappearance of the Ottoman Empire in 1918, Near East largely fell out of common use in English, while Middle East came to be applied to the re-emergent countries of the Islamic world. However, the usage of Near East was retained by the variety of academic disciplines, including the archaeological and ancient history, where it describes an area identical to the term Middle East, which is used by these disciplines. See Near East. Because, you know, it was really Northeast Africa that they changed. And that's, you know, the bottom line. So continuing on. Language, geography, culture, history, historical origin. It is almost impossible to understand the significance of the Old Testament events and themes apart from the geographical, cultural, and historical situation that existed during the Old Testament times. First of all, the name Africa comes from a Shemitic name, Afur. Afur, Africa, was also called Kemet, Libya, or Tengia, This one's hard. Kothia, Egypt, Ethiopia, of course the Sudan as well as Sudan. Olympia, Hesperia, Oceania, and Temeria. The ancient name for Africa also was Akubula, mother of mankind, or in other words, it was referring to the Garden of Eden. Continuing on into 19, we're going to stop here, but we're going to continue on and we're going to get into origins in part 3. We're going to understand origins without bias, without all this here ignorant hatred and so forth, this Ham thing, this Shem thing, this Jacob thing, because you used to be busy in the King James and European interpretation. You just take too much at face value. And what you don't do is you don't get to the root of what these things are saying, what the message is, and what's being said. Yes, I'm being frank. I'm being straight up with y'all. We're going to go to the Torah with it. We're going to go to the language with it. We're going to take it to its root in part 3. As you know, and an example is simply this. This name was used by the Moors, the Nubians, the Nadubians, they say Ka'at Hadans, the Kothians, the Ethiopians. Genesis 10:6-20 describes the descendants of Ham as being located in North Africa, Central Africa, and in parts of what they like to say Southeast Asia, which is Northeast Africa. Psalms 105 mentions the land of Ham. Psalm 78:51 connects the tent or the house of Ham with Egypt. Genesis 10, Nimrod is the son of Ethiopia or Cush, whose name means black, founder of civilization in Mesopotamia. Genesis 11. And Genesis 11 is where we also get the genealogy